I did just get out of the shower, definitely. I was... Hold on, let me finish putting my chapstick on. I was binge watching Euphoria, and I looked at the clock and it was literally like 1:30, and I was like, oh, I need to get ready. So I hopped in the shower and I literally did my makeup in like 5 minutes. But yeah, we're here. How did you like the chapters? Okay, y'all were right. About 3/4 of chapter 6 was a little boring. And then at the end, I got my heart torn out of my chest. So, justice for my man Rylan. I'm so upset that they killed him off, because I'm even more upset that like I didn't see it coming, because why else would Hawk end up like being like with her, you know, if her guard was still alive? So I figured that, you know, I would have gotten that, but I'm still really upset that they killed Rylan. Whatever. But Poppy's a fucking badass, because she literally stabbed... I don't think that was Castile, was it? Was that Castile? Is that his name? Castile? I don't think that was him, was it? It was just someone that he knew, or like someone that worked for him. Whatever, we'll figure it out. And what happened now? Oh yeah, Hawk is back. Fucking spawned out of nowhere. So yeah, I'm excited to see him. So yeah, now we're on chapter 9. And yeah, let's see what happens. Okay. This last thing that happened was that they attended Rylan's funeral, right? Oh, I was so sad. Sweat dampened my skin as I dipped down and spun the long, thick braid of hair whipping around me. I kicked out, and my bare foot connected with the side of Victor's shin. Caught off guard, he staggered to the side as I shot up beside him. He started to strike back, but froze. His gaze dropped to where I held the dagger to his throat. The corners of his lips turned down. I smiled. I win. It's not about winning, Poppy. It's not. I lowered the dagger, stepping back. It's about surviving. Isn't that winning, though? He shot me a sidelong glance as he dragged his arm over his forehead. I suppose you can look at it that way, but it's never a game. I know that. I sheathed the dagger at my thigh. Dressed in a pair of thick leggings and an old tunic of Victor's, I walked across the stone floor toward an old wooden table. I picked up the glass of water and took a long drink. If I could dress like this all day, every day, I'd be a happy girl. But if it were a game, I still would have won. You only got the upper hand twice, Poppy. Yes, but both of those times I would have sliced your neck. You got the upper hand 3 times, but they would have been nothing more than flesh wounds. Flesh wounds. He barked out a short, rare laugh. Only you would think disembowelment a paltry flesh wound. You're such a sore loser, or a poor loser. I thought this wasn't a game, he scoffed. Grinning, I shrugged as I faced him. Dust danced in the sunlight that poured through the open windows. The glass had long since been removed, and the room was either drafty or near frigid in the winter, or unbearably hot in the summer. But no one ever checked for us here, so the extreme temperature variances were more than manageable. It was the morning after Rylan's funeral, too early for much of the castle to be moving about. Nearly all the staff and the stronghold's inhabitants follow the schedule of the Ascended, and the servants, as well as the Duke and Duchess, believed that I was still abed. Only Tawny knew where I was. Rylan hadn't even known, as Victor always had morning duties with me. "How is your head feeling?" he asked. "Fine." He arched a fair brow. "Are you telling the truth?" A faint bluish-purple bruise over my temple. Oh my god! I just realized who I picture Victor as. Do y'all watch The Legend of Korra? I literally picture him as Tenzin. And that's why I pictured him bald with a mustache. Because that's Tenzin. And it just clicked now. A faint bluish-purple bruise over my temple was all that remained. The skin around my mouth was no longer red. There was a superficial cut along along the inside of my cheek that any amount of salt seemed to find its way into, but other than that, I was fine. Not that I would admit it, but Victor suggesting I take it easy and rest yesterday probably had a lot to do with that. After Ryland's funeral, I spent the day in my chambers, reading one of the books Tawny had brought to me. It was A Tale of Two Lovers, star-crossed yet faded. The title had fallen in the things Penelope is forbidden to read pile, which was pretty much everything that didn't involve some sort of educational material or the teachings of the gods. I'd finished the novel last evening, and I wondered if Tawny could bring me another. It was doubtful. Preparation for the upcoming rite was consuming much of her spare time. Whenever Tawny couldn't bring a book for me to read, I would simply sneak into the Athenaeum. Oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm illiterate. And help myself. Plus, with the attempted kidnapping and what had happened to Melissa, I didn't want her out there roaming around, which meant I also shouldn't be roaming around unguarded. But the Athenaeum wasn't too far, just a few blocks beyond the castle and easily accessible through the grove. Disguised, no one would know that I was the maiden, but it still felt too risky and dumb to do something like that so quickly after the attack. It hurt a little last night, but not since I woke up. I paused. The man had a weak punch. Victor snorted as he approached me, sliding his short sword into its scabbard. Did you sleep well? I considered lying. Do I look like I haven't slept? He stopped in front of me. You rarely ever sleep well. I imagine what happened with Ryland has exasperated your already poor sleeping patterns. Oh, are you worried about me? I teased. You're such a good father. His expression turned bland. Stop deflecting, Poppy. Why? I'm so good at it. But you're actually not. Rolling my eyes, I sighed. It took a while to fall asleep, but I haven't had a nightmare in a while. Victor's gaze searched mine as if trying to determine whether I was lying, and the man probably could. I wasn't lying, exactly. I hadn't had a night terror since I went to the Red Pearl, and I wasn't sure why that was. Perhaps falling asleep thinking about what had happened in the Red Pearl had somehow switched the gears of my brain away from past trauma. If so, I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth. What the fuck does that mean? Who do you think will replace Ryland? I changed the subject before he could continue down the road of questioning. I'm not sure, but I assume it will be decided fairly soon. My mind immediately went to Hawk, even though he couldn't possibly be in the running, not when there were so many others from the Rise who'd been here longer. But the question sort of toppled out of me anyway. Do you think he would be the one who came from the capital recently? The guard who stood by my side at the funeral, who assured me that I wouldn't be hurt again. You're talking about Hawk? Victor asked, securing his other sword. Oh, is that his name? He lifted his gaze to mine. You're a terrible liar. I'm not, I frowned. What am I supposedly lying about? You didn't know his name? Praying that my flushing cheeks didn't give me away, I folded my arms over my chest. Why would I? Every woman in the city knows his name. What does that have to do with anything? His lips twitched, as if he were fighting a smile. He's a very handsome young man, or so I've been told, and there's nothing wrong with you taking notice of him. He glanced away. As long as that is all you do. My cheeks did flush hotly then, because I had done far more than simply take notice of Hawk. When exactly would I have had a chance to do anything other than take notice, which is, might I remind you, strictly forbidden? Victor laughed once more, and my frown increased. When has something being forbidden ever stopped you? That is different, I said, wondering if the gods would strike me down for so blatantly lying. And when would I even have a chance to do something like that? I'm actually glad you brought that up. Your little adventures will need to come to an end. My stomach jumped. I have no idea what you're talking about. He ignored that. I haven't said much in the past about you and Tawny sneaking off, but after what happened in the garden, that has to end. I snapped my mouth shut. Did you think I didn't know? His smile was slow and smug. I'm watching even when you think I'm not. Well, that is creepy. I didn't even want to know if he knew that I'd been to the Red Pearl. Creepy or not, just remember what I said the next time you think of sneaking out in the middle of the night. Before I could respond, he said, "And regarding Hawk, I would say that his age would make him becoming your personal guard doubtful." But my heart started thumping, and I was barely aware of Victor taking the glass from me. He is exceptionally skilled, more so than any of the royal guards now. I wasn't stroking his ego yesterday when I said that. He came here, held in high regard by the capital, and he appears to be close to Commander Jansen. He finished off my glass of water. I wouldn't be all that surprised if he was promoted over others. Now my heart was slamming itself against my ribs. But to become my personal guard, surely someone who is more familiar with the city would be a better fit. Actually, someone new and less likely to be complacent would be the best, he said. He would see things differently than many of us who've been here for years or longer, see weaknesses and threats we may overlook out of monotony? Whatever, y'all know what it is. And he showed yesterday that he has no problem stepping up while everyone else stood by. All of that made sense, but he couldn't become my personal royal guard. And if he did, I'd have to speak to him eventually. And if I did that, he'd recognize me at some point. And then what? If he was close to the commander and determined to rise through the ranks, he would be sure to report me. After all, the highest-ranking guards who had a chance of living to see a well-funded retirement were the royal guards who protected the Duke and Duchess of Macedonia. Monotony. Okay, thank you, Piper. During the day, when the sun was high, the great hall, where the weekly city councils and grand celebrations were held, was one of the most beautiful rooms in the entire castle. Windows taller than most of the homes in the city were spaced every 20 feet or so, allowing the warm, bright sun to drench the polished white limestone walls and floors. The windows offered views of the gardens to the left and the temples atop the undying hills. Heavy white tapestries hung the length of the windows and in between them. The golden royal crest embossed... oh my god. Y'all, I'm so sorry. I haven't talked much today, so words are not coming easily to me. The center of each banner, creamy white pillars adorned with flecks of gold and silver were spaced throughout the long, wide chamber. White and purple jasmine flowers climbed out of silver urns, perfuming the air with their sweet, earthy scent. The hand-painted ceiling was the true masterpiece of the great hall. Above, all the gods could be seen watching over us. We're going to skip over that because I don't want to embarrass myself trying to pronounce their names. Jesus, there's a lot. Oh, Penelope's the goddess of wisdom. Oh. Okay, but as I stood on the raised dais, oh my god. To the left of the seated Duchess, there was no sunlight pouring in through the windows, only the dark night. Several sconces and oil lamps placed to provide as much light as possible cast a golden glow throughout the hall. The gods did not walk in the sun, so neither did the Ascended. How had Ian adapted to that? If it was a sunny day, he could be found outside, scribbling in one of his journals, recording whatever stories his mind had drummed up. Did he now write in the moonlight? I would know sooner rather than later if I was summoned back to the capital. Why they can't walk in the sun? Bianca is struggling with reading because she's thinking of Hawk. I mean, you're not lying. Yeah, this entire time, the main question in my head is, when is Hawk coming back? That's all I've been thinking about. Anxiety bloomed, and I pushed that thought aside before the unease could spread. I scanned the throng of people who had filled up the great hall, pretending that I wasn't searching for one face in particular and failing miserably. I knew Hawk was here. He always was, but I hadn't seen him yet. Full of nervous energy, I unclasped and then wrung my hands as someone, a banker, continued to heap praise upon the Tiermans. She did the hand thing. The Ascended can't walk in the sun. That's... okay. You all right? Victor bent his head, keeping his voice low enough so only I would hear him. I turned just the slightest to the left and nodded. Why do you ask? because you've been fidgeting like you have spiders in your gown since the beginning of this, he answered. Spiders in my gown? If I had spiders in my gown, I wouldn't be fidgeting. I'd be screaming and stripping down to nothing. I wouldn't care at all who witnessed it. I wasn't sure exactly what had me so incredibly restless. Well, there were myriad things, considering everything that had happened recently, but it felt like more than that. It had started after I'd left Victor, a brief headache I attributed to the punch and possibly overdoing it during training. Not that I would admit that, but after lunch it had faded, only to be replaced by a wealth of nervous energy. It reminded me of the blend of coffee beans Ian had shipped from the capital. Tawny and I had only drunk half a cup, and neither of us could sit still for the entire day afterward. Making a more conscious effort to remain still, my gaze shifted to the left, to the gardens, where I had found such peace before. My chest ached. Oh, I hadn't gone to the gardens last night or at any time today. The area hadn't been forbidden to me, but I knew if I stepped foot outside I would be surrounded by guards. I couldn't even imagine how the upcoming rite would go. But I didn't think I could ever go back to the gardens, no matter how much I loved them and the roses therein. Even now, just looking at the shadowy outline of the garden through the windows brought forth an image of Ryland's blank stare. Drawing in a shallow breath, I pulled my attention from the garden to the front of the hall. Members of the court, those who had ascended, stood the closest, flanking the dais. Behind them were the ladies and lords in wait. Royal guards stood among them, their shoulders bearing white mantles with the royal crest. Merchants and businessmen, villagers and laborers crowded the hall, all there to petition the court for one thing or another, air their grievances, or curry the favor with his or her grace. Plenty of the faces that stared up at us were wide-eyed and slack-jawed with awe. For some, this was the first time they'd seen the brown-haired beauty, Duchess Tierman, or the coolly handsome Duke, whose hair was so blonde it was almost white. No, that's so funny. Because I literally pictured the Duke as Joffrey from Game of Thrones. That's funny that he's blonde. For many, this was the first time they'd seen as close as they were to an Ascended. They looked like they were in the presence of the gods themselves, and in a way I guess they were. The Ascended were descendants of the gods, by blood, if not by birth. And then there was me. Nearly none of the commoners who stood in the great hall had ever seen the maiden before. For that alone I was subjected to many curious, quick glances. I imagined that word of Melissa's death and my attempted abduction had also traveled widely by now, and I was sure that had aided in the curiosity and the buzz of anxious energy that seemed to permeate the hall, except for Tawny. She looked half asleep as she stood there, and I bit down on the inside of my cheek when she smothered a yawn. We'd been here for nearly 2 hours already, and I wondered if the Tierman's asses ached as much as my feet were beginning to. Probably not. Both looked mighty comfortable. The Duchess was dressed in yellow silk, and even I could admit that the Duke cut a rather dashing figure in his black trousers and tailcoat. He always reminded me of the pale snake I'd once stumbled upon near the beach as a little girl. Beautiful to look upon, but its bite dangerous and often deadly. Swallowing a sigh as the banker began to speak of their great leadership, I started to look towards the temples. I saw him. Hawk. A strange, funny little hitch took up residence in my chest at the sight of him. He stood between two pillars, arms folded across his broad chest. Like yesterday, there was no teasing half-grin on his face, and his features would have been considered severe if it weren't for the unruly strands of midnight-hued hair tumbling over his forehead, softening his expression. A tingling sense of awareness swept down my spine, spreading tiny bumps all over my skin. Hawk's gaze was lifted to the dais to where I stood, and even from across the hall and from behind the veil, I swore our gazes connected. Air whooshed from my lungs, and the entire hall seemed to fade away, going silent as we stared at one another. My heart thumped heavily as my hands spasmed open and then closed. He was staring at me, but so were a lot of others. Even the Ascended often stared. I was a curiosity, a sideshow put on display once a week to serve as a reminder that the gods could actively intervene in births and in lives. But my legs still felt strange, and my pulse fluttered as if I'd spent the last hour practicing different combat techniques with Victor. Magnus, a steward to the Duke, announced the next to speak, drawing my attention. Mr. and Mrs. Toulis have requested a word, Your Graces. Dressed in simple but clean clothing, the fair-headed couple stepped out from a grouping of those waiting toward the back. Hold on. I need to get comfortable. I feel like I'm about to be in for it. Okay. The husband had his arm around his shorter wife's shoulders, keeping her tucked close to his side. Hair pulled back from her bloodless face, the woman wore no jewels but held a small swaddled bundle in her arms. The bundle stirred as they approached the dais, little arms and legs stretching the pale blue blanket. Their gazes were fixed to the floor, heads bowed slightly. They didn't look up, not until the Duchess gave them permission to do so. You may speak, she said, her voice hauntingly feminine and endlessly soft. She sounded like someone who'd never raised their voice or hand in anger. Neither were untrue, and for what had to be the 100th time, I wondered exactly what she and the Duke had in common. I couldn't remember the last time I'd ever seen them touch one another, not as if that was necessary for the Ascended to marry. Unlike others, Mr. and Mrs. Toulis clearly shared a wealth of feelings for one another. It was the way Mr. Toulis held his wife close, and in the way she lifted her gaze, first to him and then to the Duchess. Thank you. The wife's nervous gaze darted to the male royal. Your Grace. Duke Tierman tilted his head in acknowledgement. It is our pleasure, he told her. What can we do for you and your family? We are here to present our son, she explained, turning so the bundle faced the dais. The little face was creased and ruddy as he blinked large eyes. The Duchess leaned forward, hands remaining clasped in her lap. He is darling. What is his name? Tobias. Tobias? Tobias sounds better. The father answered. He takes after my wife, as cute as a button, if I dare say so myself, Your Grace. My lips curled into a grin. That he is, the Duchess nodded. I do hope all is well with you and the babe. It is. I'm perfectly healthy, just like him. And he's been a joy, a true blessing. Mrs. Toulis straightened, holding the baby close to her breast. We love him very much. Is he your first son? The Duke asked. Mr. Toulis's Adam's apple bobbed with a swallow. No, Your Grace, he isn't. He's our third son. The Duchess clapped her hands together. Then Tobias is a true blessing, one who will receive the honor of serving the gods. That's why we're here, Your Grace. The man slipped his arm from around his wife. Our first son, our dear Jamie, he passed no more than 3 months ago. Mr. Toulis cleared his throat. It was a sickness of the blood, the healers told us. It came on real quick, you see. One day he was fine, chasing around and getting into all kinds of trouble, and then the following morning he didn't wake up. He lingered for a few days, but he left us. I'm incredibly sorry to hear that. Sorrow filled the Duchess's voice as she settled back into her seat. And what of the second son? We lost him to the same sickness that took Jamie. The mother began to tremble. No more than a year into his life. They'd lost 2 sons. My heart was already aching for them. Even with the loss I'd experienced in my life, I couldn't even begin to understand the kind of anguish a parent must suffer when they lose a child, let alone 2. If I felt it, I knew I would want to do something about it, and I couldn't. Not here. I locked my gift down. That is truly a tragedy. I hope you find solace in the knowledge that your dear Jamie is with the gods, along with your second-born. We do. It's what's gotten us through this loss. Mrs. Toulis gently rocked the baby. We come today to hope, to ask. She trailed off, seeming unable to finish. It was her husband who took over for her. We came here today to ask that our son not be considered for the right when he comes of age. A rolling gasp echoed through the chamber, coming from all sides at once. Is that a bad thing? I'm guessing that's a bad thing. Ooh. Mr. Toulis's shoulders stiffened, but he forged ahead. I know that it's a lot to ask of you and the gods. He is our third son, but we lost our first 2, and my wife, as much as she desires more babes, the healer said she shouldn't have more. He is our only remaining child. He will be our last. Oh, do they sacrifice their third child? What? But he is still your third son, the Duke responded, and my chest hollowed. Whether your first thrived or not doesn't change that your second son and now your third are fated to serve the gods. But we have no other child, your grace. Mrs. Tulip's lower lip trembled as her chest rose and fell rapidly. If I were to get pregnant, I could die. I understand that. The tone of the Duke's voice didn't change. And you do understand that while we've been given great power and authority by the gods, the issue of the right is not something we can change. But you can speak with the gods. Mr. Tulis moved a step closer, but drew up short when several royal guards shifted forward. A low murmur rose from the audience. I glanced to where Hawk stood. He was watching what I believed to be the Tullius' third tragedy play out before us, his jaw as hard as the limestone around us. Did he have a second or third brother or sister who'd been given over to the right? One who may go on to serve the court and receive the blessing from the gods, and another he would never be able to see again. You can speak with the gods on our behalf, couldn't you? Mr. Tulis asked, his voice rough like sand. We are good people. Please. Tears rolled down the mother's face, and my fingers itched to reach out and touch her, to ease her pain, even if for a little while. We beg of you to at least try. We know the gods are merciful. We have prayed to... there's the name. Ios and Niktos every morning and every night for this gift. All we ask is that what you ask cannot be granted. Tobias is your third son, and this is the natural order of things, the Duchess stated. A piercing sob left the woman. I know it's hard, and it hurts now, but your son is a gift to the gods, not a gift from them. This is why we would never ask that of them. Why not? What harm could there be in asking? Surely there were enough in service to the gods that one boy would not upset the natural order of things. And besides, some exceptions had been made in the past. My brother was proof of that. Many in the audience appeared rooted in shock, as if they could not believe the audacity of what was being asked. There were others, though, whose faces were soaked in sympathy and marked with anger. Their stares were fixed on the dais, on Duke and Duchess Tierman, and on me. Please, I beg of you, I beg. The father dropped to his knees, his hands folded as if in prayer. I gasped, my chest squeezing. I wasn't sure how it happened or why, but my control over my gift snapped, and my senses opened. I sucked in a sharp breath as grief poured into me in icy waves. The potency shook my knees, and I could barely breathe around it. A moment later, I felt Victor's hand on my back, and I knew he was prepared to grab me in case I went to them. It took everything in me to stand there and do nothing. Tearing my gaze away from Mr. Tulis, I forced out deep, even breaths. My wide eyes roamed the crowd as I pictured a wall in my mind, one as great as the rise, so tall and thick that no one's pain could breach it. That had always worked in the past, and it worked now. The claws of sorrow loosened their grip, but my gaze snagged on a blond man. He stood several rows back, his chin bowed and much of his face obscured by the curtain of hair that fell forward. I felt something burning through the wall I'd built, but it didn't quite feel like anguish. It felt hot, like physical pain, but it was bitter tasting in the back of my throat, as if I'd swallowed acid. He had to be in pain, but unnerved, I closed my eyes and rebuilt the wall until all I felt was the pounding of my heart. After a few seconds, I was able to take a deeper, stronger breath, and finally, the strange sensation disappeared. I opened my eyes as the father pleaded. Please, we love our son, he cried. We want to raise him to be a good man, He will be raised in the temples of Rahar and Ion? Yeah, where he will be cared for while in service to the gods, as it has been done since the first blessing. The Duke's voice brooked no argument, and the woman's sobs deepened. Through us, the gods protect each and every one of you from the horrors outside the rise, from what comes in the mist, and all we must do is provide them with service. Are you willing to anger the gods to keep a child at home, to grow old or possibly sicken and die? Mr. Tulis shook his head, his face draining of all color. No, your grace, we would not want to risk that. But he's our son. That is what you ask, though, the Duke cut him off. In 1 month from his birth, you will give him to the high priests, and you will be honored to do so. Unable to look at the tear-stricken faces any longer, I closed my eyes once more and wished I could somehow drown out the sounds of their heartbreak. However, even if I could, I wouldn't forget them. And truthfully, I needed to hear their pain. I needed to bear witness to it and remember. Serving the gods in the temples was an honor, but this was still a loss. Cease the tears, the Duchess implored. You know that this is right and that the gods have, and what the gods have requested. Bro, fuck the gods. But this didn't feel right. What harm would come in asking for one child to remain at home with his parents, to grow, to live, and to become a useful member of society? Neither the Duke nor the Duchess would bend to grant such a simple favor. How could anyone mortal be unmoved by the mother's pleas, her cries, and her husband's desolate hopelessness? But I already knew the answer to that. The Ascended were no longer mortal. Chapter 10. We're on chapter 10. Don't really like these people. Okay, so is this one of those situations? Obviously, I know y'all aren't going to answer me, but I just want to voice my thoughts out loud. Is this one of those situations where, like, homegirl thinks she's on the good side, like, she thinks that she's on, like, the side that she's supposed to be on, and that the other side, like, the fucking, what the fuck is he, the Dark One Prince or whatever, it turns out that he's actually the good guy? Like, he's actually, like, or is it just, like, well, then why the fuck do they have Craven if they're the good people? I don't know. I just feel like obviously it's not what it seems. And so I'm waiting for that moment where she, like, finds a piece of information that she's never been told and is not supposed to know, and, like, figures out that she's not like on the side that she's supposed to be on. We aren't answering this. I know you're not. But I just, like, obviously this isn't, like, a good side to be on. So I want to see the other side and see how they live. Anyway, chapter 10. I smothered a yawn as Tawny helped secure my veil in place, feeling like I hadn't gotten a moment of rest. My mind wouldn't shut down last night. I couldn't stop thinking about Melissa or Rylan, the threat of the Dark One, and what had happened with the Toulis family. The utter hopelessness that had drenched the mother's face as her husband had led her from the chamber haunted me, as did the audience parting and giving them a wide berth. Right? Yeah. It was as if their requests had left the Tulliuses with an infectious taint. As they left, cradling their infant, their heartbreak had projected, becoming a tangible, lingering entity. But that wasn't the only part of this that preyed upon my mind. The look that had settled over Hawk's face as he watched the broken couple also kept resurfacing. Anger had hardened his jaw and pressed his lips into a firm, unyielding line, and he wasn't the only one in attendance who'd borne what could easily be construed as the mark of resentment. I thought of the blonde man I'd seen and what I'd felt from him. It had to be some form of pain, as that was the only thing I could feel from others. But it had reminded me of the anger that had settled into Hawk's features and in others. Men and women of different classes who didn't look upon the Tullises with distaste, but had instead stared at the dais, unable to hide their displeasure and bitterness. Had some of them handed over third sons and daughters to the priests, or would they soon be watching their second sons and daughters go to court after their right? Had the Duke and Duchess noticed those stares? Oh my God. I doubted they did, but I was sure the royal guards had. As Victor had said, this was a time of unrest, and it was spreading. I didn't think it could all be blamed on the dissenters. Whatever. Some of the fault could be laid at the feet of the natural order of things, to the right, which was beginning to feel unnatural when extenuating circumstances such as the Tullises' plight were ignored. Could it be changed? The way things were done. That was another thing that had kept me awake. Surely the gods had enough sons and daughters to serve them. They had the entire kingdom, and maybe it could become a case-by-case basis. when it came to those who served the gods at the time of their rite. Many parents were honored to have their children do so, and for some, a lifetime in servitude to the gods was a far better life than the one they would have had if they remained at home. Could I change the order of things once I returned to the capital before I ascended? Did I have that kind of power? Surely I had more than the ladies and lords in wait, as I was the maiden. I could speak to the queen on behalf of the Tulises, and if I ended up returning from the gods as one of the ascended, I could continue petitioning for change. I could at least try, which was more than the Duke and Duchess were willing to do. That was what I decided before I finally drifted off to sleep, only to wake up a few hours later to meet with Victor. "You sound like you need a nap," Tawny commented as she secured the final chain of the veil. "If only I could do just that," I sighed. "I have no idea how you can't nap during the day." She stepped to my side, tucking the ends of the veil till the length fell down the center of my back. "Give me any comfy chair and you'll be out cold in minutes. Makes me so jealous." I slipped my feet into white slippers with all too thin soles. "Once the sun comes up, I can't sleep." "That's because you can't stand to be idle," she responded, "and sleeping requires a certain amount of idleness, which is something I excel at." I laughed. We all have to be good at something. She shot me a look just before a sharp rap sounded, and then Victor's voice rang out. Heading for the hall door, I groaned even though I had expected his arrival. I was due to meet with Priestess Analia for prayers, but in reality the time was generally spent with the priestess criticizing everything from my posture to the wrinkles in my gown. "If you want to make a run for it, I'll tell Victor you jumped out the window," Tawny offered. I snorted. "That would only buy me a 5-second lead time." "True." Tawny reached the door before me, all but throwing it open. The moment I saw Victor's face, I tensed. Deep grooves of tension bracketed his mouth. "What happened?" I asked. "You've been summoned to meet with the Duke and Duchess," he announced, and knots of dread formed. Tawny sent me a quick, nervous glance. "What for?" "I believe it has to do with who will replace Rylan," he said, and instead of feeling relief, like I knew Tawny did given how her shoulders loosened, my unease grew. "Do you know who?" I followed him out into the hall. He shook his head, sending a lock of sandy blonde hair across his forehead. "I haven't been told." That wasn't exactly uncommon, but I would think that since Victor would be working closely with whoever replaced Rylan, he'd be one of the first to know. "What about Priestess Analia?" I asked, ignoring the raised brows that Tawny directed at me as she fell into step beside me. And yes, I was surprised that I was asking, since jumping out a window would also be preferable to spending an afternoon listening to all the things that were wrong with me. But a bad, anxious feeling had taken root in my stomach. "She's been advised there will be no session this week," Victor answered. "I'm sure you're disappointed to hear that." Tawny stifled a giggle as I stuck my tongue out at Victor's back. We made our way to the end of the otherwise vacant wing of the castle and headed to the narrow hallway that accessed the main staircase. The wide stone steps fed into a large foyer where servants dusted statues of Penelope and Rain. The 8-foot-tall limestone statues stood in the center of the circular space and were cleaned every afternoon. How there could be even a speck of dust or dirt on any part of the statue was beyond me. The foyer led to the front of the castle, where the great hall sitting rooms and oh my god, my eyes are doing the thing. My eyes are doing the thing where I'm skipping ahead because I just want to see if Hawk is her person, so I'm gonna have to fucking put a piece of paper in front of it to keep me from looking. However, Victor led us to the right of the statues, through the archway adorned with lush green garland. The large banquet table designed to seat dozens was cleared of all except for the golden vase in the center, containing several long-stemmed, night-blooming roses. Oh, that's a little... Okay, read the room. Air catching in my throat, my gaze latched on to the roses as we skirted the table, walking toward one of the doors to the right that had been left ajar. Is that a sign that something's happening? The sight of the flowers, the scent. I could practically smell the blood. Tawny lightly touched my shoulder, drawing my attention. I exhaled, forcing a smile. Her worried gaze lingered as Victor opened the door to one of the Tierman's many office spaces in the castle, this one used for less intimate meetings. My gaze swept the room, and my heart stopped. It wasn't because the Duke sat behind his black-painted desk, his pale head bent as he scoured whatever paper he held in his hand. Nor was it because the Duchess stood to the right of his desk, speaking with Commander Jansen. What caused the reaction was the dark-haired young man standing beside the commander, dressed in black and armored in leather and iron. Ah! Shut the fuck up! My lips parted as my heart tumbled all the way to the pit of my stomach while Tawny came to a sudden stop, blinking rapidly as if she just walked into the room to find one of the gods. Slowly, she looked over at me, and the corners of her lips turned up. She looked curious and amused, and I was sure if she could see my face, I likely looked like I was 5 seconds from bolting from the room. In that moment, I really wished I'd told her about Hawk and the Red Pearl. I couldn't think of another reason why Hawk would be here with the commander, but I desperately clung to the hope that Victor had been wrong, and it had nothing to do with Ryland's replacement. But what other reason could there be? A sudden new fear took root. What if Hawk had discovered that it was me at the Red Pearl? Oh my gods, that seemed improbable, but wasn't Hawk becoming my guard just as unlikely? My heart seemed to restart, and was now in a race with itself. The Duke looked up from his paper, his coolly handsome face giving me no indication of what was about to occur. Please close the door, Victor. The stately room stood out in too vivid detail as Victor moved to obey the request. The royal crest painted in gold on a white marble wall behind the Duke was blinding, and the bare walls were in stark contrast to the black chair rails that ran along the length and width of the room. There was only one chair besides the one that the Duke sat. Oh my god, besides the one the Duke sat in. That was a plush, cream-colored wing-back chair that the Duchess usually occupied. The only other seating options were polished limestone benches placed in 3 neat rows. The Duke was as cold as the Duke. The room was as cold as the Duke, but it was far better than the chamber he usually preferred. I need to stop reading ahead. My eyes are like trying to read ahead. The one I'd been summoned to far too often. Thank you, Tierman nodded at Victor, his smile closed-lipped as he lowered the paper to the desk. His black, fathomless eyes flicked to where I stood, just inside the door. His mouth tightened as he motioned me forward. Please sit, Penelope. Legs oddly numb, I forced myself to cross the short distance, wholly aware of Hawk's gaze tracking my every step. I didn't need to look to know that he watched. His gaze was always that intense. I sat on the edge of the middle bench, folding my hands in my lap. Tawny took the bench behind me, while Victor moved to stand to my right, so he stood between me and the commander and Hawk. I hope you're feeling well, Penelope, the Duchess said as she sat in the chair beside the desk. Hoping that I was only asked simple yes and no questions, I nodded. I'm relieved to hear that. I was worried that attending the city council so soon after your attack would be too much, she said. For once, I was beyond grateful for the veil, because if my face were visible, there'd be no hiding how ridiculous that concern was. I'd been bruised, not seriously injured or shot through the chest with an arrow, as Ryland had. I would be fine. I was fine. Ryland would never be okay. What happened in the garden is why we're all here. The Duke took over, and the muscles all along my neck and back began to tense. With the death of... His fair brow pinched as disbelief whirled through me. What was his name? Are you fucking kidding me? He asked of the Duchess, whose forehead creased. The guard. Ryland Keel, Your Grace, Victor answered before I blurted out his name. The Duke snapped his fingers. Ah, yes, Ryland. With Ryland's death, you are down 1 guard. My hands curled into fists. Ryland. His name was Ryland. Not... Oh! Hey, he didn't even say Ryland. He said Ryan. Oh, it's raining, y'all. My hands curled into fists. Ryland. His name was Ryland, not Ryan. No one corrected him. Again, the Duke added after a pause, a faint twist of his lips forming a mockery of a smile. 2 guards lost in 1 year. I hope this isn't becoming a habit. He said it as if it were somehow my fault. Anyway, with the upcoming rite, and as you draw closer to your ascension, Victor cannot be expected to be the only one keeping a close watch on you, Tierman continued. We need to replace Ryan. I bit the inside of my cheek. Which, as I am sure you realize now, explains why Commander Jansen and Guard Flynn are here. I might have stopped breathing. Guard Flynn will take Ryan's place. Yep, I knew it. Okay, well, yeah, anyway. Effective immediately, the Duke said, confirming what I had already guessed the moment I walked into the room, but hearing him say it out loud was an entirely different thing. I'm sure this is surprising, as he's new to our city and quite young for a member of the Royal Guard. I was wondering exactly that. The Duke sounded like he too was questioning it. I feel like Hawk is not who we think he is. But I don't know what, like, I don't know who he could be. Does that make sense? Anyway. There are several Rise guards in line to be promoted, and bringing Hawk is no slight to them. The Duke sat back, crossing one leg over the other, but the commander has assured us that Hawk is better suited to the task. I couldn't believe this was happening. Guard Flynn may be new to the city, but that isn't a weakness. He's able to look at possible threats with fresh eyes. Commander Jensen spoke up then, nearly parroting what Victor had said before. Any number of guards would have overlooked the potential of a breach occurring in the Queen's gardens, not due to lack of skill. Debatable, murmured the Duke. Shut the fuck up. The commander wisely continued without acknowledging the comment. But because there is a false sense of security and complacency that often comes with being within one city for too long, Hawk does not have such familiarity. He also has recent experience with the dangers outside the Rise, the Duchess spoke, and my gaze sharpened on her. Your ascension is a little less than a year from now, but even if you're summoned sooner than expected, or at the time of your ascension, having someone with that kind of experience is invaluable. We won't have to pull from our huntsmen to ensure that your travel to the capital is as safe as possible. The dissenters and the Dark One are not the only things to fear out there, as you know. I did know, and what she said made sense. There were fewer huntsmen, and not many guards were suited for travel outside the Rise. Those who were had to excel at killing. Wasn't that what Hawk had said he was really good at? The possibility of you being summoned to the capital unexpectedly played a role in our decision, Jansen said. We planned trips outside the Rise at least 6 months in advance, and there could be a chance that when and if the Queen requests your presence in the capital, we'd have to wait for the huntsman to return. With Hawk being assigned to you, we would be able, for the most part, to avoid that situation. The gods hated me. And that wasn't exactly surprising, considering all the things I regularly did that were forbidden. Maybe they had been watching, and this was my punishment. Because how in the world did the commander not think a single Rise Guard was better suited or qualified? Was Hawk that good? My head moved then, without any command from my brain. I looked to where Hawk stood and found his gaze fixed on me. A shiver curled its way down my spine. He inclined his head in acknowledgement, and I swore there was a faint glimmer to his amber eyes, as if he were amused by all of this. But surely that had to be my paranoia. But what if it's not? What if it's not? As a member of the Maiden's personal royal guard, it is likely that a situation may occur where you will see her unveiled. The Duchess's tone was soft, even a little sympathetic, and then it struck me. I knew what would occur now. They're gonna talk about her fucking scar? Why are they talking about her scar like she is, like, half of her face was burned off? I'm not y'all thirsting over Hawk. Hold on. I want to thirst over Hawk with y'all, but not right now. Wait till I'm done. It can be distracting seeing someone's face for the first time, especially a chosen, and that could interfere with your ability to protect her. That is why the gods allow this breach. For some reason, I had been so caught up in fear of being discovered that I'd forgotten what had happened when Rylan was brought in to work with Victor. Commander Jensen, if you will please step outside, the Duke said, and my wide gaze shot to him. There was a smile on his face, one that was wholly pleased and not at all forced and brittle. I didn't even realize the commander had left until the click of the door closing behind him jolted me. You are about to bear witness to what only a select few have seen, an unveiled maiden. Tierman announced to Hawk, but his gaze was centered on me, to where my hands trembled in my lap. A real smile appeared on his face, turning my stomach. Penelope, please reveal yourself. Dear Poppy has more than just one scar on her face. Aww. Okay, but Hawk is obviously not going to be like, what the fuck is that? I don't think fan art of her shows just how bad her scars are. I figured that they had to be worse than what fan arts, because like the fan arts I've seen, it's just like 3 little scratches down her face. But I'm thinking if she was fucking mauled by something, they would be a little bit, not a little bit, but like far worse than just that. Like I figured that she's literally so good. Of course she is, yeah. The Duke is a fucking bitch for trying to make her feel insecure about her scars. Okay, last chapter, besties. Chapter 11. There had been a handful of times in my life where reality felt more like a dream. The night I'd heard my mother's screams and my father's shouts to run was one of them. Everything had felt hazy, as if I was there but somehow disconnected from my body. My parents being slaughtered was far more serious and traumatizing than what was happening right now. Still, I was on the brink of possibly being discovered, and if Hawk told the Duke where I'd been, my mouth dried as a fist clenched deep in my chest. Perhaps there was some truth to what Victor had said about me wanting to be found unworthy. But even if that were true, I would want to be as far away from the Duke as possible if and when that occurred. Hawk hadn't seen my full face the night at the Red Pearl, but he'd seen enough that it could trigger recognition. At some point, he was bound to figure it out, probably after he heard me speak. However, I hadn't considered that moment occurring here in front of the Duke and Duchess. Penelope, the Duke's tone carried a thread of warning. I was taking too long. We do not have all day. Give her a moment, Dorian. The Duchess turned to her husband. Okay, now it's getting loud and I have to talk louder. The Duchess turned to her husband. You know why she hesitates. We have time. I was not hesitating for the reason they believed. Why the Duke smiled with such relish. Of course, I was uncomfortable bearing my face, my scars, in front of Hawk. Truthfully, though, that was the least of my concerns at the moment. But the Duke was probably internally screaming with twisted joy. The man absolutely loathed me. Dorian Tierman pretended that he didn't, that he thought I was this miracle born, a chosen, just like his wife believed, but I knew better. The time spent in his other office proved exactly how he felt about me. I wasn't sure what it was about me that he hated, but there had to be something. As far as I knew, he was at least somewhat decent toward the ladies and lords in wait, but me? He loved nothing more than discovering something that made me uncomfortable, only to then exploit it. Yeah, no, he is, I definitely picture him as Joffrey. As Joffrey now. And if I really wanted to make his day, I'd give him something to be disappointed in, a reason to continue his lessons. Face burning as if on fire, from anger and frustration more than embarrassment, I reached for the clasps along the chains at the same moment Tawny rose, nearly tearing them apart as I unhooked them. The veil loosened, and before it could fall, Tawny caught the sides and helped ease the headdress off. Cool air kissed my cheeks and the nape of my neck. I stared straight at the Duke. I wasn't sure what he saw in my face, but his smile faded, and his eyes turned to shards of obsidian. His jaw clenched, and I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. I smiled. It was just a hint of a grin, one that probably wasn't noticeable to anyone but the Duke, but he saw it. I knew he did. I was sure I'd pay for it later, but at the moment I didn't care. Someone shifted to my right, ending my epic stare-off with the Duke and reminding me that we weren't the only two in the room. He wasn't the only one looking at me. The right side of my face was visible to Hawk, the side that the Duke often said was beautiful, the side I imagined matched my mother's. Drawing in a shallow breath, I turned my head until I completely faced Hawk. No side profiles, no hiding or No hiding or mask that covered the 2 scars. My hair was secured in a braid and then wrapped in a knot so it too provided no curtain. He saw everything that had been bared at the Red Pearl, and then some. He saw the scars. I braced myself, just like the Duke knew I would, because deep down, whether Tierman knew or not, Hawk's reaction would affect me. It would hurt more than it should, but I'd be damned if I let it show. Lifting my chin, I waited for the look of shock or revulsion, or even worse, pity. I expected nothing less. Beauty was highly coveted and worshipped, flawlessness even more, because beauty was considered godlike. Hawk's golden gaze roamed my face, his stare so potent that it felt like a caress along the scars, my cheeks, and then my lips. A shiver danced across my shoulders as his eyes came back to mine. Our gazes locked, held. The air seemed to be sucked from the room, and I felt flushed, as if I'd been sitting out in the sun for too long. I didn't know what I saw as I stared back at him, but there was no shock etched into his expression, no revulsion, and especially no pity. His face wasn't empty exactly. There was something there, in his eyes and in the set of his mouth, but I had no idea what it was. I would kill to read his point of view of this right here. I would kill for it. Oh my God, I would kill for it. But then the Duke spoke, his tone deceptively pleasant. She's truly unique, isn't she? I stiffened. Half of her face is a masterpiece, the Duke murmured, and my skin flashed cold and then hot as my stomach twisted. The other half a nightmare. A tremor coursed down my arms, but I kept my chin high and resisted the urge to pick up something, anything, and throw it at the Duke's face. The Duchess spoke, though saying what, I wasn't sure. Hawk's gaze remained fastened on mine as he stepped forward. Both halves are a... Oh, no! Both halves are as beautiful as the whole. My lips parted on a sharp inhale. I couldn't even look to see what the Duke's reaction was, though I was sure it was nothing short of cataclysm. Hawk placed a hand on the hilt of his broadsword and bowed slightly, his gaze never once leaving my... With my sword and with my life, I vow to keep you safe, Penelope, he spoke, voice deep and smooth, reminding me of rich, decadent chocolate. From this moment until the last... Shut the fuck up! Shut up! From this moment until the last moment, I am yours. Shut up! I hate this man. I hate this man. I hate this man. I do not like him. Closing my bedroom door Hold on, I need some water after that. Closing my bedroom door behind me, I leaned against it and exhaled raggedly. He'd said my name when he took his vow as my guard. Not what I was, but who I was. And that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. With my sword and with my life, I vow to keep you safe, maiden, the chosen. From this moment until the last moment, I am yours. That was how Victor had sworn his oath, as did Haynes and then Rylan. Had the commander not informed Hawk of the correct words, I couldn't imagine he'd forget. The look on the Duke's face once Hawk had straightened could have set fire to wet grass. Tawny spun to face me, the pale blue gown she wore swishing around her feet. Hawk Flynn is your guard, Poppy. I know. Poppy! She repeated my name, practically shouting it. That, she pointed to the hall, is your guard. My heart toppled over itself. Keep your voice down. I peeled away from the door and took her hand, pulling her farther into the chamber. He's probably standing outside. As your personal guard, she stated for the third time. I know. Heart thumping, I pulled her toward the window. And I know that this is going to sound terrible, but I have to say it. I can't contain it. Her eyes were wide with excitement. It's a vast improvement. Tawny! Damn! No, thanks. Damn! Tawny, I replied, slipping my hands free of her. I know. I recognized that it was terrible, but I had to say it. She pressed her hand to her chest as she glanced back to the door. He's quite exciting to look at, indeed, and he's clearly interested in moving up in ranks. Her brows knitted as she turned back to me. Why would you say that? I stared at her, wondering if she'd paid any attention to what the Duke had said. Have you ever heard of a royal guard that young? Tawny's nose scrunched. No, you haven't. That's what befriending the commander and the royal guard will do for you, I pointed out, heart thumping. I cannot believe that there were no other royal guards just as qualified. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then her eyes narrowed. You're having a very strange, unexpected reaction. I crossed my arms. I don't know what you mean. You don't? You've watched him train in the yard. I have not. I totally had. Tawny cocked her head to the side. I've been with you on more than one occasion as you watched the guards train from the balcony, and you weren't watching just any guard. You were watching him. I snapped my mouth shut. You seem almost angry about him being named your guard, and unless there's something you haven't told me, then I have no idea why. There was a lot that I hadn't told her. The suspicion in her gaze grew as she studied me. What haven't you told me? Has he said something to you before? When would I have had a chance for him to speak to me? I asked weakly. As much as you creep around this castle, I'm sure there's a lot you overhear that doesn't actually require you speaking to someone. She pointed out and then stepped forward, her voice lowered. Did you overhear him say something bad? I shook my head. Poppy. The last thing I wanted was for her to think Hawk had done something wrong. That was why I blurted out what I did. Or maybe it was because I had to say something. I kissed him. Her lips parted. What? Or he kissed me, I corrected. Well, we kissed each other. There was a mutual kiss. I get it, she shrieked and then took a visible deep breath. When did this happen? Or I get it. Oh, okay. I read that wrong. Sorry, my bad. I hate when I get their tones wrong. Like, I hate when I misinterpret what they're trying to say and I say it one way and it's actually not supposed to be said that. Oh, it fucking just, it bothers me so much. When did this happen? How did this happen? And why am I just now hearing about this? I plopped down in one of the wing-back chairs by the fireplace. It was the night I went to the Red Pearl. I knew it. Tawny stomped her slippered foot. I knew something else had happened. You were acting too weird. Too worried about being in trouble. Oh, I want to throw something at you. I can't believe you haven't said anything. I would be screaming this from the top of the castle. You'd be screaming it because you could. Nothing would happen to you. But me? I know. It's forbidden and all that. She hurried over to the other chair and sat, leaning toward me. But I'm your friend. You're supposed to tell your friends these kinds of things. Friend. I wanted so very badly to believe that we'd be that if she weren't bound to me. I'm sorry I didn't say anything. It's just that I've done a lot of things I shouldn't do, but this is different. I thought if I didn't say anything, it would, I don't know, go away, that the gods wouldn't know. Tawny shook her head. If the gods know now, then they knew then, Poppy. I know, I whispered, feeling terrible, but I couldn't tell her why I'd kept it to myself. I didn't want to hurt her, and I sensed that this would. I wouldn't need my touch to know that. I'll forgive you for not telling me if you tell me what happened in very, very graphic detail, she said. I cracked a grin, and then I did just that. Well, almost that. As I slowly unhooked my veil and draped it across my lap, I told her how I'd come about to be in the room with him, and how he thought I was Britta. I told her how he offered to do whatever I wanted once he realized that I wasn't her, and that he'd asked me to wait for him to return. But I didn't tell her how he'd kissed me elsewhere. Tawny stared at me with more awe than even Agnes had when she realized I was the maiden. Oh my God, Poppy. I nodded slowly. I so wish you'd stayed. Tawny, I sighed. What? You can't say you don't wish you'd stayed. Not just a little bit. I couldn't say that. I bet you wouldn't be a maiden any longer if you had. Tawny! What? She laughed. I'm kidding. But I bet you'd barely be a maiden. Tell me, did you enjoy it? The kissing? I bit down on my lip, almost wishing that I could die. Yes, I did. Then why are you so upset that he's your guard? Why? Your hormones must be clouding your rational thought. My hormones are always clouding my rational thought. Thank you very much. I snorted. He's going to recognize me. He has to once he hears me speak, right? I imagine. What the hell just fell off of my cup? What if he goes to the Duke and tells him that I was at the Red Pearl, that I allowed him to kiss me and do more? But at this point, the kissing would be bad enough. He has to be one of the youngest royal guards, if not the youngest. It's clear he's interested in advancement, and what better way to secure that than to gain the Duke's favor? You know how his favorite guards or staff are treated? They're practically treated better than those on the court. I don't think he has an interest in gaining His Grace's favor, she argued. He said you were beautiful. I'm sure he was just being kind. She stared at me as if I'd admitted to snacking on dog hair. First off, you are beautiful. You know that. I'm not saying that to fish for compliments. I know, but I felt the overwhelming need to remind you of such. She gave me a quick, broad smile. He didn't have to say anything in response to the Duke being a general ass. My lips twitched. He could have just ignored it and proceeded on to the Royal Guard oath, which, by the way, he made sound like sex. Yes, I admitted, thinking I wouldn't have realized that before the night in the Red Pearl. Yes, he did. I almost needed to... Okay, but Tawny is all of us. I almost needed to fan myself, just so you know. But back to the more important part of this development. Do you think he's already recognized you? I don't know. I let my head fall back against the seat. I wore a mask that night, and he didn't remove it, but I think I would recognize someone in or out of a mask. She nodded. I would like to think that I would, and I would definitely hope that a royal guard would. Then that means he chose not to say anything. He hadn't said anything as both Victor and he had escorted us to my chambers. Although he might not have recognized me. It was dimly lit in that room. If he didn't, then I imagine he will when you speak to him. As you said, it's not like you can be completely silent every time you're around him, she stated. That would be suspicious. Obviously. And odd. Agreed. I toyed with the chains on the veil. I don't know. Either he didn't, or he did and chose not to say anything. Maybe he's planning to lord it over my head or something. Her brows slammed down. You're an incredibly suspicious person. Incredibly suspicious person. I started to deny that, but realized I couldn't. I wisely moved along. He probably just didn't recognize me. A weird mixture of relief and disappointment mingled with a thrill of anticipation. You know what? What? I don't know if I'm relieved or disappointed that he didn't recognize me, or if I'm excited that he might have. Shaking my head, I laughed. I just don't know, but it doesn't matter. What happened between us was one time only. It was just this thing. It can't happen again. That's what makes it so hot, though. Ugh! Sure, she murmured. Not that I'm even thinking he'd want to do any of that again, especially now that he knows it was me. If he does. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not a thing to even consider. What he does with the knowledge is the only thing that matters. I finished with a nod. Tawny looked as if she were seconds away from clapping. You know what I think? I'm half afraid to hear it. Her brown eyes glimmered. Things are about to get so much more exciting around here. That they are. Okay, that was chapter 11. Woo! That was fun. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Oh. Y'all know what I found out today? Okay. I lent I'm gonna say a streaming service to a boy that I had a crush on, thinking that it would help our relationship. And so today when I went to go watch Euphoria, I realized that the entirety of season 1 had been watched. We haven't talked in a long time since he rejected me, since I told him about my feelings, right? And that was months ago, like at least 6 months ago that I said that. And I figured that he would just be a nice guy and not use my HBO Max account anymore. And I've been noticing that there have been some things that I haven't watched on there that show up in like my watch again or continue watching. And I thought it was just my family, because I let my family use my HBO Max account. So today, me and my brother decided to start Euphoria. Tell me why the entirety of season 1 has already been watched. Not by me, not by my brother. None of my family watches Euphoria. None of my friends that use my HBO Max account watch Euphoria. And I know for a fact he doesn't watch Euphoria. So, my brother and I came to the conclusion that he is letting someone use my HBO Max account to watch Euphoria. I was so mad. I'm still so mad. I'm changing my password today. Sarah, I'm changing my password today. I was so mad. Anyway, I just had to get that out there because I'm just so annoyed right now. Men are literal shit garbage. Oh! But anyway, Hawk is hot, yes. And he would never do that to me. Okay, theories. Because I have a couple theories. I feel like I know Hawk is not who he says he is, because there's no way that he's just this random like guy that lives in the capital that is just like crazy good at everything that he does and like is ranked as this super high general. He was either planted there or trained somewhere else to be as good as he is. By who, I'm not gonna say. I don't know if he is a dissenter, but it would make a lot of sense if he was. And I don't think that this chosen one, that these dissenters are bad people. I think they're being framed to be bad people. And the ones that are making the history books, lies. Lies. This is all a conspiracy. I'm telling y'all. This is all a conspiracy. I feel it in my bones. There's no way. There's no way. These fucking Craven are being created in a lab. And the call is coming from inside the house. Let's just say that. The call is coming from inside the house. Are you jaded by A Court of Thorns and Roses? Maybe. Ever since I read that series and I found out that Tamlin is actually a piece of garbage, I've been a little mistrusting with who I like in books. And it ends with Us by, what was her name? Colleen Hoover, I think. I've just been so distrusting of where books will take me. And so now I'm like, expect the unexpected. So, the call, I'm just going to say that the call is coming from inside the house. That's all I'm going to say. And watch me embarrass myself because now I'm mistrusting instead of too trusting. And I just end up fucking everything up. But yeah, the more I read and the more information I'm given, the more theories I will have, because I'm just a very anxious person and I like to theorize. Who is Jeremy? Oh, Verity. Oh, I haven't read that one. I'm like almost done. I'm pretty sure that I will be done with The Witch's Heart today, because literally last night I was sobbing, couldn't put that book down until I was just like drooling almost to sleep. And I finally had to put it down because I was falling asleep and I wasn't retaining anything that I was reading. But let me just say that book, I will probably either have a review up today or Monday. Yeah, either today, tomorrow, or Monday. Over The Witch's Heart, and I won't put any spoilers in it so that you guys can enjoy it, because not gonna lie, that book was a little hard to like get into just because of the way it's written, but when it gets good, it gets good, and it got good last night, and I was just crying on the couch. And let me just say this, if I ever see Loki, this book's version of Loki, because now I'm going to go up and look up the mythology of Loki and see if any of this is actually like see what actually happened. But if I find this book's Loki in person, it's on site. It is on site. I'm just going to roll away from these theories. Okay, so the theories for right now are the call is coming from inside the house, and the Craven are not created by the Dark Ones or the Chosen, the Atlanteans or whatever. They weren't the bad guys, and that these people are the bad guys, and Homegirl is serving the wrong purpose. I have some standalone recommendations for you, by the way, since you said no more series. I want to read series with y'all because y'all are so invested in them and attached. Loki treated her like shit, had a whole other family, and he's such a, don't even get, I really read this book thinking that it was going to make me like mythology Loki more, and now I just want to, I want to wring his damn neck. I want to burn my Loki shirt. Oh, don't expect any content from me that is not about Attack on Titan tomorrow, because Attack on Titan comes back tomorrow. Do not expect me to post anything about books tomorrow. It is purely Attack on Titan tomorrow. Just a heads up. Oh, I'm so excited for this season, even though I already know. I read the manga. I know what's going to happen, but I'm so excited for it. And all the theories that I've been seeing, I'm like, yeah, it's purely Attack on Titan tomorrow. Don't spoil for me. I won't spoil. Don't worry. I won't spoil. But Piper, get ready, girl, because it is a trip. But yeah, okay. So, what are those fucking seagulls outside? Do y'all hear that? What is that? When I came out here, what the hell is that? When I came out here earlier, there was a hawk the size of my entire body that flew away. A hawk. A hawk. I can't escape him. Hyperfixation on AOT, yes. Yep. AOT is starting tomorrow. Yeah. Tomorrow's the 9th. Do I know what time it comes out? No, I do not. But do I know it comes out tomorrow? Absolutely. And I will just be watching. What the hell is that? Comes back tomorrow, besties. Oh my god, it's a hawk. No, like it's a legit hawk. There's 2 of them. What the hell? Oh, they have a net. Y'all. There is a whole hawk's nest above me. What? Did y'all hear that? That's so fucking cool. That's so fucking cool. What is that sound? Oh. Oh my god. I think they're feeding their babies something that they caught. Oh, the circle of life is happening in front of me and I don't like it. Here, let me see if y'all could. How do I. Oh, I just liked my live. How do I flip the camera? There it goes. Okay. Y'all can't see it, but they're like, oh, you see that? There's like one right there, and there's another one right there, and their nest is like right there. I don't know if you can hear the babies. That's so crazy. That's so crazy. What the heck? That's so crazy. Oh my god. Philip, better be careful. I don't think they're big enough to take Philip. But I definitely think they did have an animal in there, and I'm like trying not to cry thinking about that poor animal. But I don't think they're big enough to take Philip, and I'm always outside with Philip anyway. So they'll have to take him out of my cold dead hands if they want to take Philip. But okay, that concludes today's live. When will I go live again? Let's see. Tomorrow, I'm probably not doing anything but watching Attack on Titan. But I don't want to... I don't want to set a live for tomorrow because I don't know what time Attack on Titan comes out, and I don't know what I'll be doing emotionally after that. Others are saying read 12 to 13 yourself, 14 through 17 on live. Okay. Oh, yay. Okay. So 12 through 13 by myself. And then come back for 14. Okay, so I'll read 12 and 13 tomorrow. And then I'll go live on Monday. Okay, that sounds like a solid plan. Okay, so then, yeah, I'll go live on Monday. 14 through 17 live, and then 25 through 30. There's like I think there's 2 families. Okay, let me write that down before I forget. Do I have a piece of paper? I have a crumpled up receipt. And I'll use that. Because if I don't write it down, I will forget. Okay, so 12 through 13 alone. 14 through 17 live. 25 through 30 live. Everything's just going to shit outside. Oh my god. Okay. Sounds good, besties. So then I'll see y'all Monday for 12 through 13. No. 14. See, I already forgot. 14 through 17. I think it comes on at 3 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so yeah, I won't go live tomorrow. And then I have to read the chapters tomorrow. Because today I'm finishing The Witch's Heart. And then tomorrow I'll read 12 through 13 by myself. And then Monday we'll go live again for 14 through 17. Sounds good. Wait, but 20 through 22. Oh, so y'all want me to read 20 through 22 as well? I can do that. So 20 through 22 live. Okay. 14 through 17 live, 20 through 22 live, 25 to 30 live. Is that good? Does that cover? Yeah, of course. Okay. So then, yeah, we're all set. I will see you guys on Monday. Thanks for watching today. I'm going to go finish watching Euphoria and finish reading The Witch's Heart. Even though whoever's using my HBO Max account has already seen it. Whatever. All right. Bye, love. See you on Monday.